doesn't apply in like lay debates in Washington, but I think like everyone probably wants to be doing like, tech and like national circuit debates. So that's why I'm talking about this. So when you read a framework about like developing world and they concede it, right? It basically allows you to ignore their whole case. Like if you just win your case and just like you harm one person in the developing world and they don't like do anything for the developing world, like sure, maybe like they, kill like 20 people in America, but you are saving one person in the developing world. Like even if though they outweigh on magnitude, you're already winning because you're winning the framework because the judge is always going to have to look to the developing world first because they basically conceded the framework, right? So it makes the debate a lot easier for you because like not only can you ignore their entire case, but if you just win your like one contention or that one subpoint about developing world, you're gonna win like the whole thing, right? So that's why super strategic to like, read a framework in rebuttal. Or you could even like put it in case, right? Like you could be like, our framework is prioritizing the developing world for XYZ reasons. Just read at the top of your case, and then you can be like, okay, now contention one is blah blah blah. So you can put framework in constructive or rebuttal. It's good to always read one though. And then, so when we're like weighing in summary, like it's important to not do fake weighing, right? And like what I mean by fake weighing is like a lot of people are like, oh, well, judge, prefer my world because, I like put like 10 rebuttals on their case and I delink them like 3 times and then I turn their impact like 5 times. And like on my case, they put no ink, right? Like I'm winning my entire case, so you should just vote for me. Like that's like fake weighing, right? Like the point of weighing is to just in case, even if the judge really does buy their case and like give them some kind of offense, you have to explain why your impact is more important, right? So you're taking them at their highest ground and you're not being like, oh yeah, they aren't winning their case, so just vote AF. Like, no, that's not weighing, right? So what you would do is, for example, if you had racism and they had something like nuke war, right? Like first there's like three main types of weighing, right? Like the first is probability, right? Like all impacts have some kind of inherent probability. Like the probability that, passing coronavirus stimulus will reduce poverty is probably super duper high, right? Because it's like stimulus just does that historically and it's the link chain is super simple. But then if you look on like neg, for example, right? Let's say neg is running nuke war and they're like, if we pass corona stimulus, um, it's gonna screw the economy over. No, no, no. If we pass corona stimulus, it's gonna make Trump look really good for the 2020 elections, and Trump's gonna get voted in. And then Trump's really bad because he never reassures our allies that we'll protect them, and he'll want to withdraw troops from South Korea. So then South Korea will build nukes, and then everyone else will build nukes, and then because of the nuclear proliferation, everyone will cause a nuke war, and then that's extinction, right? Like the link chain there is super duper long, and just inherently the chances of nuke war happening are like super super duper tiny, right? But the chances that you're solving for, poverty by giving people money for free, right? Like that's really really high. So you can be like, okay, first is on probability, right? We're winning here because like they have like we have had nukes for so long, but you know, we haven't had nuke war yet, and that's because of things like mutually assured destruction. Like we all don't want to cause extinction, so we're not gonna like try and kill each other. But on my side, we have historical precedents, right? Like when you pass stimulus bills, people are lifted out of poverty. Historical precedent proves, right? And then another way to do probability, I think, which is really, really strategic, is talking about intervening actors, right? So when we think about intervening actors, like what it is the number of people and like factors that could influence your impact, right? Like let's say, you know, um, passing stimulus, right? Like you can say like, oh yeah, you can pass stimulus and maybe it'll lift people out of poverty, but because, employers are racist, they won't hire, you know, like minorities, like Hispanics or Black people or, Asians because they're scared of coronavirus or something. So, these people won't be lifted out of poverty. So you don't solve for like these racial minorities, right? Or like on nuke war, you could be like, there's so many intervening actors. Like America wouldn't want anyone to be in a nuke war. China doesn't want anyone to be in a nuke war because it causes like, like mass global economy devastation, which they obviously don't want. So there's so many people that could like step in and be like, no, don't go to nuke war because we're all gonna die, or like, they're solving for extinction or like something like that, right? So just like the number of people. But then the second weighing mechanism is, do you think this would be easier if I like put it like typed out my thoughts as I was going? Okay, well, I'll just assume that's a yes. Let me just, okay, so. Okay, so first is probability, which we talked about. You can do intervening actors and inherent probability. Right. And then the second weighing mechanism is magnitude, right? And this first is like severity, right? Like, oh, well, you only push people into poverty, but my impact is death. And like death is worse than poverty because you can come out of poverty, but you'll never come back from the grave. So that's like severity. Or like, like sure, people are sad because like they can't make s'mores. But in my world, like they're starving to death. So I would say it's a lot worse that you're like starving to death instead of like you're unable to be happy because you can't make s'mores, right? So that's on severity. Second one is scope, right? Like my scope is bigger than yours. Like I affect 20 people in 29 countries while you only affect people in America. Like I'm winning on scope, even if you're winning on like severity perhaps, right? And then the third is just like magnitude. It's just like my number is bigger than yours. Like you kill 10 people, but I kill 100 people. Like obviously I'm winning here. So that's magnitude. Easiest form probably. And then the last one is time frame, right? And there's a lot that goes into time frame. First, let's just say like long term versus short term impact, right? So like they can be like, oh, sure, you're looking at the short term that it'll like help some people get out of poverty by passing stimulus. But in the long term, because you pass this stimulus, you lead to like a lot of federal debt, and like in the long term, you're hurting more people because like you're destroying our economy because of all the debt and all the interest payments that we have to do in the future. So that's like, like usually judges will prefer like they just default to like long-term impacts, right? Like, okay, sure, you help the economy now, but you're screwing it over later for a very long time. So probably long-term is like more important than short-term impacts. That's long-term and short-term. And then there's also, but obviously it can go the other way, right? Like, this is where like prereqs come in, like prerequisite. Basically what this means is that mine happens before yours, and it either causes yours to happen or prevents your thing from happening, right? So for example, if AF was like their impact was like solving for racism, and then the neg impact was like solving for a recession, right? The neg would be like, okay, if we aren't out of a recession, you can't solve for racism because everyone's just going to be like trying to protect themselves instead of trying to help others or change the system. Or like, during a recession, minorities are hurt the most, so you'll like never be able to help them before you solve this recession first. So that's like a prereq. Or it could be like, for example, if this was like uh, a drug topic, right? Like, oh, you're lowering the prices of drugs so more people can buy them, but then that's F, and then neg is like, no, and neg is like, no, actually you make like innovation worse, so like people can't invent the drugs in the first place, right? So R&D probably comes as a prerequisite to lowering prices because like if you don't invent the drug in the first place, there's no drug to lower prices on. So it's a prereq to yours, right? That's prereq. And then the last one is kind of like intervening actors again, but it's just like how fast your impact happens, I guess. So it's kind of like time frame again, but like this is more specific and this is where you see like the short-term impacts are probably going to be winning when you're like weighing this, right? So for example, if nuke war happens like I don't know, like 20 years down the road, right? Because, okay, sure, Trump's president again for 4 years, but it takes time to, for him to pull out troops. And then it takes time for South Korea to start developing nukes. And then it takes time for other people to notice that and other people to proliferate. And it's going to take a lot of time for like them to actually start a nuclear war because there's going to be like, negotiations first or something before they actually start killing each other. And then in the app, it's probably going to be like, okay, we sign a bill and coronavirus stimulus is passed like right away. And it's starting to help the economy. Like it's really fast, right? It probably only takes a couple of months to pass. So the time frame of coronavirus stimulus is like 3 months, like bam, like there you go. We are solving for a recession right now. And then their time frame of like nuke war is like, let's just say like 10 years, for example, right? That's like where you're winning is because your impact happens first, right? Like, okay, so we happen right away. We're solving for the recession right now. That's really good. But they take like 10 years, right? And this is where intervening actors come in again, right? Like, because they take 10 years, there could be so many factors in the middle of these 10 years that could be influencing whether or not nuclear war happens, or like maybe nuclear war was caused by something else, not necessarily that Trump got voted, but that like Iran started bombing people for no reason, right? Like there's so many different factors that could go into a long-term time frame impact that you probably just shouldn't evaluate it, right? That's on time frame. And then the last one is on urgency, right? Like, oh, well, people are dying in the status quo because the recession's, pushing them into poverty and like a bunch of people are dying, right? Versus like your nuke war impact, right? Like, okay, so we need to solve for these people dying now because like they're literally dying in the squo. And if you know that you can save them, like we have this like moral obligation to solve for the deaths that we know are happening and that we know that we can solve, right? But the neg, like it's like nuke war, right? Like we have like 10 years to try and solve this in the future after Trump like screws over, international diplomacy. But once these people are dead in my world, like they're dead, right? Like you can't just like bring back people from the grave. So that's why you're trying to solve for them first. And then we can go back and try and fix Trump's mistakes. So that's where urgency comes into play. And I think this will be probably like important in future ones because like you're always going to see some kind of like now versus future impact, right? Like for example, like right now there's poverty because people are going bankrupt for paying their medical bills, right? But if we were to provide free healthcare for all, that could mean higher taxes on rich people and like in the future that would like decrease investment into like hospitals or something and like hospitals start closing down, right? But like, are you really gonna like go up to someone and tell them like, oh, sorry, you have to die so that we can protect like hospital profits and investment? Like that seems like kind of like that's like not good, right? So you have like this, so the judge has like an ethical responsibility to vote for impacts that are happening in the quo instead of like, denying people access to healthcare just in case perhaps in the future, you can save a hospital from closing down. So let's talk about how we can apply these to what is it called? Your impacts. Okay, so let's see. Juliana, which one did you have again?
World recession.
You had world recession. Okay, how about Troy? Is Troy there? No? Okay. Natalie, which impact did you have again?
Pandemics.
Pandemics. Okay, so Okay. Oh yeah, it's right here. So pandemics, Natalie, Juliana has world recession, right? So let's talk about how you guys could weigh against something else from the second speakers. Okay, so let's see. Let's do Juliana first. So let's do world recession. So Juliana, which one do you want to compare your impact to? Like, do you want to compare it, world recession to maybe like eradicating racism, or do you want to talk about it against like nuclear war?
Um, against nuclear war.
Okay, yeah, because I think nuclear war will be a really big impact. So Jerry's probably gonna run extinction, right? And you're gonna talk about a world recession, right? So I would say the way that you can win with weighing against like nuke war. Do you have any ideas at first? Like, okay, let's talk about first like
Yes.
probability. So let's say Jerry causes like says I'll cause extinction, and you say well we'll cause poverty, which also causes a bunch of deaths. So how would you weigh probability?
Wait, can you repeat that?
Yeah. Okay. So Jerry runs nuclear war causes extinction, and then you run world recession pushes millions into poverty, and then because they're in poverty, they die. So how would you weigh yours as probability against his?
Well, as you're talking about a while ago, intervene. There are many intervening actors for climate change. Sorry, not climate change. Nuclear war. So then, like China wouldn't want that, the U.S. wouldn't want that, and like no one wants that, right?
Hmm.
So that's probably not gonna happen. But also because like nuclear war doesn't necessarily mean extinction, right?
Exactly, yes. So just keep in mind that like they can fiat like nuclear war will happen, but they can't fiat that it causes recession, world extinction, right? But he also can't fiat like what kind of nuclear war, right? It could just be like nuke war between like two countries that don't even matter. Like maybe South Korea and North Korea nuke each other, and then like that's it, right? Like sure, like the Koreas die, but that doesn't mean extinction for the rest of the world, right? So you can say like, okay, well, you're probably not gonna cause like there like the nuke war scenario that Jerry has probably isn't gonna be like US against like some big power like Russia or China because they both like don't want huge wars which will like devastate the economy or like China's reliant on like America's economy. So if they were to nuke America and America was to go down, like China would probably be screwed too because their economy would be screwed, right? Instead, it's probably more likely that something else would happen, like, Iran nukes Saudi Arabia because, Saudi Arabia is America's ally and Iran is Russia's allies. But then that's like a proxy war. That doesn't cause extinction, right? And then you can say like, well, we've seen in the past, world recession always causes poverty, right? Like there's a lot of poverty we have right now. It's kind of hard to say that like, oh yeah, recessions don't cause poverty. Like kind of hard to say that. Um, so that's why your probability is winning on like historical precedent, right? Like we've never personally seen a nuclear war that causes extinction, probably because no one wants it, right? So you're probably going to see like a really small one.
Could you say like that? If there's a world recession, like the countries would like help each other to like improve um their trade relations to like improve the economy, and because the diplomatic relations between countries improves, then there won't be a nuclear war, or is that just not possible?
Um, I think you, yeah, I think you can try and prereq. There, this one's hard. Let me ask, but okay. I think maybe you can't really say like your impact doesn't happen, but rather it's more like my impact also links in, right? Like, look, when there's a world recession or when we prevent one from happening, right? That's really good because during world recessions, people are like so defensive about their economies and like diplomacy falls apart, which is why you're going to be seeing like nuke war is even more likely because now people like want to nuke each other so they can take over their territory or something, or like world recessions heighten tensions between countries, and that increases the chances of nuclear war. So we're also causing nuclear war because of world recession. So like overall, okay, if both worlds have nuke war, is it better to have a world with nuke war and no recession, or nuke war and a global recession, right? Like,
Wait, wasn't I just saying that world recession would prevent a nuke war? Not like the opposite.
I don't think you can say, um,
Oh, just like not in this tournament thing.
yeah. Oh yeah, yeah. But in like a normal world, like of course you could do that. But like just in this tournament, Jerry kind of fiats that nuke war happens for him. So you can say like we make it like less bad, right? Like in a world recession. Okay, but then you'd be arguing world recession good. I mean, I guess you could do that. I think that gives you really little offense though, right? Like, because if you say world recession good, like why else is world recession good other than it increases diplomacy? Because you have
Well, increased diplomacy is probably the closest you're gonna get to like world peace or something.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I guess you can do that. Okay, yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, so if you were to go world recession good because it solves nuke war, I think you could say that during the tournament. I think, yeah, that'd be fine. Like mine is a prereq to yours because I actually solve for your impact. You could do that. Yeah, you can do that during the tournament.
But doesn't that? But don't you assume that like the nuclear war happens like right away or something, or is it just what?
This is so messy. Okay, I'm asking the other coaches and I'll see what they think, but before we talk about that and while I'm waiting for their response, let's talk about like we could talk about like magnitude. I think it'd be pretty hard to win on world recession with magnitude, but if you can like prove that nuke war only happens between two countries, you're probably winning on scope because global is like every single country in the world. Um, and then for time frame, you could say, okay, so if we assume both happen at the same time,
Well, it's more likely that a world recession would last longer because like it's not really easy, especially if all the economies are like trash. But like for nuke war, it'll probably be like two people just bomb each other and they realize that the impacts are awful and then they both create some sort of treaty or something, right?
yeah, yeah, you could say something like that. Like, there's world recessions are really hard to solve for. Like we're still trying to recover from the Great Depression, I don't know, from the like '08 recession, right? But like a lot of countries are still like stuck in poverty because of that. But nuke war, they just like nuke each other and then they're fine. Like it's gonna be fine. But like global recession, the impacts are like happening exponentially for a very, very long time. So
Wait, I
yeah,
do have a question though.
yeah.
If you nuke like someone's nuclear storage stuff, then do you just get rid of their nukes or like what? Is it?
Basically, yes. Yeah. So if you nuke their nukes, it'd probably cause an even bigger explosion because like, two nukes together, but you do also get rid of their nukes. But obviously, like not everyone necessarily knows where like each other's nukes are. But yeah, you can make that argument. So you could say like nuke war good because actually you prevent more nuke war in the future because all we're doing is nuking each other's nukes. Um, yeah. So I think
But that's
okay,
not
so
guaranteed that a country will nuke someone's
yeah,
nuclear
yeah,
storage.
you don't know. So um okay, I got the response back from Hannah. She says yes. Okay, so we're in this tournament for everyone, you know. Um, we're gonna assume that your impacts happen right away. So, like, a world recession happens immediately. Nuke war happens immediately. So there's no time for you to really prereq nuke war. So you couldn't run the prereq that world recession solves for nuclear war in this tournament. But in a real tournament that's not impact calc, you could do that.
Wait, so for my topic, which is pandemics, it's just like pandemic happens immediately, right?
Yes, or you could say we completely end all pandemics in the future immediately, or and end COVID-19 immediately right now. Like you could say you cause more or we solve for them. Like either way, you're just saying like pandemics end or all pandemics are solved.
Wait, I'm kind of confused because when I was talking in the non-breakout room, like the actual
Mhm. Yeah.
meeting, they were saying like I should write about like what will happen if we don't treat this pandemic, but now you're saying it's the pandemic in the future,
Yeah,
like
so your
the
pandemics
aftermath.
thing is all pandemics, like the pandemic happening right now, and you're solving for all pandemics in the future as well. Because obviously there's gonna be more pandemics, right? Like, they just discovered this swine flu in China, which is like really similar to like COVID-19. So like there's another potential pandemic waiting to happen, but you're the one who solves for all pandemics in the future. Does that make sense?
So wait, I'm really confused. So what do I write about?
Okay, I would recommend that you just write about like the the worst pandemic ever. Like, you could just search up like what would happen if there was another pandemic, how many people would the biggest pandemic kill, right? And you can use that number. Or you can talk about like solving for COVID-19. But I think it's probably more strategic to just pick like, okay, let's see. How many people will a future pandemic kill? Okay, would have killed 33 million people. There you go. Oh, look, 80 million people. You can be like 80 million people will die.
I'm just wondering, but like, if you're doing, let's say Natalie's pandemics, would you assume that it's happening like right now? So there's gonna be two pandemics going around, or just like what?
That's a good question. It depends if Natalie goes for COVID-19, right? Like if Natalie chooses to talk about we solve for COVID or you cause COVID to continue, um, then it would be about COVID. But if Natalie decides to talk about like you cause, another pandemic to happen, that's like, um, I don't know, like a pandemic like Black Death, then it would be going on at the same time as COVID-19.
Wait, so basically what I write about is like if I choose COVID-19, I just write about what will happen if we don't solve for COVID-19, like what will happen in the future.
Yeah. You can write about that, right? You can be like, okay, so right now it's gonna take us like 2 years to get a vaccine, but then like the economy would be shut down for another 2 years and another millions of people will die. So that's your impact, right? Because you solve for like COVID-19 right away, right? So you can either be like that or you can talk about like the impacts like right now, right? Like, okay, um, 9 million people have died. So if we solve for like COVID, that's basically like solving for, yeah. So you would be talking about the future impacts.
Also, like, um, isn't there a world recession right now already because like of COVID?
Yeah.
So when I talk about world
I think
recession,
we are thinking of this
like a Great
tournament.
Depression everywhere or something,
Yeah.
would I get to, would I get to, would I get to choose what the situation is like?
Probably. I think
So I
so.
could say that
Wait,
like the
wait.
economies
That would
are
be
all
hard. Be hard. You can say there's a world recession, but you can't necessarily say it's gonna be exactly like the Great Depression, right? So it's kind of like how Jerry can't say nuke war between America and Russia. Like that would just be like, be really hard for you to respond that like it wouldn't cause extinction, right? So you can't necessarily fiat what kind of like recession or like what the recession will look like, but you can read like general cards, right? Like world recessions in general push 900 million people into poverty. Like that's just an IMF card that it is out there, right? And I think should probably be thinking about these impacts maybe in a vacuum, as in ignore everything that's happening in the world and just think about this in terms of debate. Like everything's running normally, and then boom, you got a world recession. What would happen, right? So you're just debating about the impacts of world recession. You don't have to take into account like there's a recession right now, so causing a world recession, the impacts wouldn't be as bad as if we caused one in a good economy, right? Like you just have to debate about what like it would look like if there was a world recession, just the normal impacts. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Kind of. But like the world recession right now, like how bad really is it? I mean, I don't really know the effects because
Oh, well, yeah, I don't really know either, but I would say it's especially bad in developing countries because, like, for one, they're trying to quarantine people, right? But these people in developing countries, like, they literally need to go to their jobs every single day. And, like, their jobs aren't the kinds where, like, you can put on a mask and be okay. Like, they kind of require, like, person-in-person interaction, right? So, like, when we're, like, quarantining these people and, like, but like they can't be quarantined, right? So they're just like going out to their jobs, which aren't doing really well because the economy's suffering. But they're also having this huge chance that they're being infected because, you know, because they can't quarantine themselves. But at the same time, their jobs aren't making them that much money either. So it's like, I would say it's really bad. I don't know that much about like what's happening right now, but it's been pretty bad in America.
So for a pandemic, everything would just get exponentially worse.
Yeah, I would say that. And, you know, Natalie, you can implicate that too, right? Like the next pandemic will also cause quarantining and a recession. So I also cause a recession, right?
I have a question. I'm gonna talk about COVID, like heads up. So basically, since I'm gonna talk about, okay, so you know how you're saying about I forgot what you call it, the impacts that COVID will give. Do you think that like making everybody like sanitize every single like day and then like wearing face masks for like an extra couple months, do you think that would be an impact, or would that not be? Or like, do I need bigger impacts?
I think you definitely need bigger impacts rather than like, oh, it's inconvenient to like wash your hands every day, right? Because like probably should be something we should be doing anyways, but also other people have things like, you know, Jerry has like nuke war and he's like, we're causing extinction. You're there like, oh, well, at least we don't have to put face masks anymore, right? Like, so you'd probably be losing already. I think you should just try to talk about the deaths and the economic impacts of pandemics. Like, obviously, pandemics, if it's bad as Corona, like, because it's Corona, right? We end quarantine.
Okay.
So then you can reopen your economy and it's going to be really good. Yeah. So for Natalie, let's talk about your weighing, right? So when we're looking at like pandemics, okay, do you want to what do you want to weigh against? Do you want to weigh against like space colonization, eradicating racism?
I don't really care.
Okay. So let's talk about like first let's talk about how you can weigh like probability, right? So you solve for pandemics and because COVID is like it's going on right now, your probability is like super easy to do. I think your probability is super duper high because we know like you're obviously going to be solving for the economy because the reason why our economy is bad is because we had to quarantine and shut down our economy because we didn't want people to get corona. But now that you solve for corona, we can reopen the economy. Everything's going to be amazing. America's going to buy a bunch of goods again. China's going to come back online. Everyone's economy is going to be lit. So you're solving for like economy. That's like probably a really high probability versus something like you know, communism takes over the world. I think actually I don't know which way Kathy's gonna go. Okay, so versus like bioweapons, right? Like sure, bioweapons might kill a lot of people, but like it's like the same impact as like, you know, corona because corona kills a lot of people too. But bioweapons don't cause a recession, but you know, pandemics do, like at least the corona kind. So you're linking, so you have like the same impact of deaths as Daniel, but you have one more, which is we're saving the economy too. So when we're looking at things like probability, right? Like, okay, yes, you do get that bioweapons are like shot at some random country, but you don't know like how many people will this actually kill, right? Like obviously people will try to find a solution really quick, and usually the way that bioweapons are, they aren't really like spreadable diseases, like they aren't like shooting COVID-19 at people. They're usually shooting like things like that just kill you and you alone, if that makes sense. Kind of like a bomb. Like you do not infect other people with your bioweapon.
I also have one more question.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, so when we're debating, are we debating against your own grade, or are we just debating against like anybody that's in the competition?
Oh, that's a good question. I think it's probably gonna be anyone that's in the competition.
Oh no.
Don't worry, I got you guys. Okay. Is Troy there? Troy, can you say something if you're there so I know if you actually need me to go over the way you can weigh and stuff? Okay, Troy is probably watching YouTube. That's fine. So let's talk about how y'all can weigh your impacts against all of these. Okay, so first let me explain space colonization. Jacqueline's probably gonna say it's good, and you can probably impact turn it. So space colonization is basically now we can live on Mars, on Earth, on the moon, on sorry, we already live on Earth, on Jupiter, like we can live in other solar systems too, because yeah, space colonization happens, right? It's basically like we can now live in space. And the like it's good because, we can escape all the problems on Earth and we can escape global warming. And, one day we're going to overpopulate the Earth. So it's probably good that we can move to somewhere like Mars and get new land and stuff, right? But you can also say that it's bad because, as people try and like rush to do space colonization, there's going to be like space war because like kind of like Star Wars or something, because like everyone wants to be like dominating a new planet, but they don't want like the other person to do it. So you're like sending nukes through space, which is like horrible. So
Can I also say, like, since you are colonizing through space, like, basically, like, since we already have colonized on Earth, if we colonize like on somewhere like, let's just say Mars, like after a couple hundred years, like in the far future, like it's going to be basically Earth, and then there's going to be global warming, and then you're going to have to move again, and then it's going to be like a whole
exactly. So you can be like, sure, like space colonization happens, but that doesn't mean you escape extinction. Like, you're also going to cause global warming there. So maybe you like the whole planet's going to explode, and that's really bad for like XYZ reasons, right? So you can also talk about like, yeah, you have space colonization, but that doesn't mean you solve for all, like we're probably going to bring our bad habits everywhere, right? And I think another thing you can say for space colonization is like alien invasion. Like I bet there's a lot of evidence out there that says like, okay, if we were to space colonize, there's like aliens on Mars, and then they're like superior to us technologically, so they would like eradicate human race because now we discovered aliens just as we were trying to space colonize, and they got offended, so they killed us, right? So that's another disad. So I would say for space colonization, there's space wars, and this is like a disad, which is basically like reasons why their case is bad, right? Space wars and then alien invasion. Okay. And then for eradicating racism, it's gonna be yeah, don't impact turn this. Don't be like eradicating racism is bad. Like obviously there probably won't be any reasons why you're gonna say that. But I think what you could say is like, okay, like what is the impact of like eradicating racism? It's probably gonna be like, okay, now like, minorities can get jobs and they can be lifted out of poverty, or like less, you know, Hispanics are being shot to death, or less black people are being shot to death by the police, right? So it's probably like deaths and poverty. But you can be like, okay, but if we have a pandemic, even if there wasn't racism, you'll still be killing a lot of people. So like, or like if we have a worldwide recession, like sure you eradicated racism, but everyone's gonna be in poverty anyways, right? Like you try to lift them out of poverty, but then you just push them into a recession, which would be equally as bad, even if employers weren't racist. And then on climate change, you can say um so so for eradicating racism, it's basically just like link in. So say like we cause your impact as well. Like you say you solve for poverty, but you actually cause it because you cause a worldwide recession, right? For climate change, you can say you can either link in by saying like, okay, if they go for okay, I mean you can impact turn it by saying like um climate change good. It solves for over which is like kind of an iffy argument, but if you can prove that, you know, climate change won't cause extinction, there's a lot of cards you can read on that, right? But overpopulation will because of like, you know, everyone's gonna fight for resources and like we're gonna run out of food, we're gonna run out of land, there's gonna be nuclear wars, and then overpopulation causes extinction, you can win that, right? You can also link into climate change by saying like, okay, sure, you solve for climate change, like right now, but then like you just cause more because in a recession we burn a bunch of fossil fuels or something like that. So you can link into.
So I have to go right now, so bye.
Okay. Bye,
Have
Natalie.
fun.
Okay. So then for nuke war, I think we talked about nuke war a lot. So Chinese hedge, no one has that. Cyber war with all countries. Okay, I think this will be you can say first, it's not like you can hack into people's brains. So like the probability that people are dying because like you hack someone is like super duper low, right? Versus like a world recession, which pushes people into poverty and kills them. Like I would say, yeah, that's probably the link chain is a lot easier. And this cyber war with like all countries, and so like sure it happens, but then it's like solved super quickly because like
Wait,
everyone
what
is
is a cyber war like?
oh, cyber war is basically like you just hack each other. Like it's not really like you're not going to shoot nukes, you're not going to shoot weapons. It's just like I hack, for example, probably what Suba is going to read is things like, oh, they're going to hack the electric grid and shut down electricity for everyone, which kills millions of people because people need it for like heating during the winter, or they need it, you know, to cook their food, to light the house. If we don't have traffic lights, people will die because car crashes, right? So a lot of reasons. They can also be like, we hack your nukes. So then your nuclear waste facilities are like screwed over, right? So then like nuclear waste leaks into the rivers and that causes radiation, which kills a bunch of people by giving them cancer. And then there's also like we hack your what is it called? We hack your water. So like so you know, instead of like cleaning the water, it makes the water even more dirty, and that's really bad because like you know everyone relies on water, and when you drink like bad water, it leads to like cholera and a bunch of deaths. So I think Suba's probably gonna go for like cyber war bad, right? And also like stealing intel, you know, like they're gonna steal America's government's top secret intel. They're gonna hurt the economy by hacking into websites and like shutting Amazon down or something, which will like destroy our economy because everyone is so reliant on like Amazon, for example, right? And I think you can actually impact turn this, because I think you can say like in the past, America actually like hacked Iran's like nukes, and then we stopped them from like being able to develop their nukes, right? So it's really good because if like everyone had a cyber war, everyone would want to hack the nukes first to like get rid of people's ability to nuke each other, right? So if we did get rid of all nukes, that's even better because like now there's no risk of nuke war if you don't have a nuke. So you can say impact turn prevents nuke. Or you could say like, oh yeah, sure, you cause a cyber war, but then a recession comes in, and during a recession, people run out of money, so then the governments will run out of money to do this cyber war. So eventually it'll just stop, so the impact is very small. On communism takes over the world. think Kathy's probably gonna go for it's good. If she goes for it's good, you can impact her by being like, okay, well, Marxist communism requires that like there's a revolution everywhere, which basically means like all the poor people go and kill a bunch of rich people and take over the government, which would obviously be a super bloody process. It'd be like horrible, right? So a bunch of people would die. That's bad. But if she goes for, communism bad, like, oh, it's gonna kill a bunch of people because of the revolution, you can say no, communism is good because now like capitalism is the root cause of like poverty because there's inequities in the system. But once you have like Marxist, equality, everyone has the same amount of money, everyone has the same amount of everything. There's no reason to be fighting over anything. There's no reason to have wars because everyone has the same amount of everything. You're like not going to be fighting with each other, right? So wars probably kill more people than just like normal revolutions. So you prefer us on that, or like communism solves for poverty. So that also is really good. Against bioweapons, you could probably just like debate like the impact, right? Like, oh, the bioweapons aren't that strong. Like, sure, a bioweapon happens, but like no one is advanced enough to create a bioweapon that actually kills that many people. So, yeah. Do you have any questions before I end this session?